This is Stephanie Hooper. Thank you for tuning in to the Meaning of Everything podcast, where we are working to reimagine, reinvent, rediscover what it means to be human. So, a few quick things. Today's podcast is going to be about our New Year's resolutions, specifically one that I made last year. I'll tell you a story about it, and hopefully it won't be overly boring. Please feel free to skip it, but I think it might be of interest to people because it's about love and sex. I'm going to talk about my resolution last year to be celibate for the year of 2018. A few quick things. Last episode, when I had on Tyler Tully, who was fantastic, and there was a great response to him, of course, and I can provide ways to get in touch with him and his work. Anyway, I said that it was episode 11. I was incorrect. It was episode 12. I had forgotten that I was choose to do an episode during the Christmas week, which I had originally considered taking off, but I decided to do one. So that was 11. And I misspoke yesterday or Monday for that. So that's one thing. Another is, I often in these shorter episodes on Thursdays like to reflect on themes that we had discussed previously. I did, however, think that Tyler and I were accessible enough and communicated clearly enough, and we're definitely really in touch with the humanity of it all, with his talking about his personal experiences with evangelicalism and trauma and power and what the world needs. Those things were all really, really important. I think we were really thorough. And so I'm going to let that conversation rest for now and pick it up another time. It's definitely an ongoing conversation, and perhaps one of the more important conversations happening in the world today. What do we do about the increasingly polarized, political religious rhetoric in the United States? What do we do about it? And Tyler and all of that conversation definitely plugs into that. So that'll be an ongoing conversation in this podcast. For sure. It's so important. But also this is an opportunity to talk about New Year's, which is a holiday that I have vacillated on many times. Of course, in my younger years, I had a lot of disdain for it because who makes resolutions was basically what I always said. If you wanted to do something, just do it at any time of the year. But I have since come to see the cultural act of it to be important, the community about it and the idea, and also the symbolism of a new year. I find to be quite beautiful. And so I don't always make a resolution. And last year, in fact, my resolution was a little bit lucky because the timing was serendipitous. So basically, here is the story. I will tell you the story of my first ever and very successful New Year's resolution. Now, I thought about talking about how to stick to a New Year's resolution as somebody who is nothing if not really disciplined, and I am, and also somebody who has spent a lot of time working in the field of nutrition. Like I know New Year's resolutions and how people behave with them back and forth, but there's so much writing about that in the world, and I would be happy to share my perspective. Let me know if you want me to. I'll do a live on it or something on some platform. But I thought it could be more interesting and important for me to talk about my personal experience. We learn a little bit about me, I suppose, also. So last year, what happened was I decided I had an experience that made me resolve to commit to celibacy. And it was fascinating because it wasn't something that I had to force myself to do. People would often say to me, oh, you must be like so struggling. Like, oh, God forbid you have to go a few weeks or months without having sex. They're like, wow, this must be so difficult for you. But actually, it was one of the easier decisions that I had ever made. It felt very natural. It felt very right to say that I wasn't going to be doing this anymore. And the place that I was in with respect to dating at this time was pretty dark. I have a long and sad history of relating to men. I see women also occasionally, but primarily men. And it was almost always deeply traumatic for me. And most of it was that I never felt like I was there were so many occasions in which I felt like I wasn't respected or seen. I always thought growing up as a child that romance and even things like one night stands would be beautiful and mutual, and people, me and another person, people would come together and be present and communicate and want to take care of and please one another, like I wanted to have a really nice space together. That was it, period. And it took me many, many years and disappointment over and over and over again, many, many disappointments, to realize that that's not how it always works in the real world. And I also learned slowly over time that you have to be very selective about the types of people that you get involved with. The thing is, when throughout my 20s, I am a dancer and often dating dancers, and was often dating dancers and getting involved with them and constantly getting burned in really bad ways, assault and kind of rape, which is a term that I came up with last year to talk about the kinds of non-consensual experiences that you don't fight particularly hard. And there was a straw on the camel's back at the end of 2017 when I met up with somebody who had historically never really respected my wants and always put his physical desires before my emotional health. And he did that again. And I was just furious. I was out shopping with my mother. We were shoe shopping, of course. And I just felt this wave of rage and commitment come over me. And I was just done. And I also realized in doing this that I had invested so much emotional energy in the quest for romance throughout my life. And I would long for people, like have this intense longing. But it sucked away energy that I could otherwise be directing towards my friendships, towards my work, towards myself. And I had always thought that I was somebody who was really good at being self-centered, not in the selfish sense, but like centered within myself, balanced, self-loving, right? Whatever, I'm pretty comfortable in my own skin and the like. And I then realized, once I stopped pursuing men and seeking their validation and attention to fill holes in my life and in my heart, or that the holes that I had been told should be there because I'm supposed to be longing for romance and attention. Once I stepped away from this race and I stepped into this journey with celibacy, I realized that I really hadn't been as good at being self-contained as I had thought all along. I really had been dependent on the chasing attention and finding it and manipulating people into liking me, playing games. I'm good at the games. I have a rule book. I have a playbook. It has 37 commandments in it. Like and that's born of personal experience. But anyway, I had always been somewhat good at that, but also chronically lonely and longing and desperate to be held and to be validated and all of the things, on top of constantly bumping up, not just against rejection, but also against this like deeply dehumanizing wall of masculinity. People refusing to talk to you after you sleep with them, or again, not asking before they do something to you that could be, questionable or non-consensual or what have you, or pushing, demanding that you give them things from your body and not at all caring about your personhood. Like, these were all real, deeply felt things that I was experiencing. And so my journey through celibacy, for the first 8 months or so anyway, I wrote off possibility of romantic or sexual connection, period. It wasn't just I'm not going to have intercourse. It was I'm not going to get romantically involved with anybody. And what happened, there's so many beautiful things happened. I would walk into a room and men would be there, and the first thing that I thought about wouldn't be A, how do I look? Or B, are any of them like good romantic targets? And I know that's an objectifying way to say it, but that's something that I think a lot of people do, and that I always did. Evaluating an environment for prospects, and then I would constantly have this cloud of expectation or potential or possibility hovering over me and hovering over interaction. Like, this is something that is just, it's a basic part of walking through the standard heterosexual world. And this is why people always say men and women can't be friends, is because there's this cloud of possibility. But I found that when I committed myself to celibacy, the cloud of possibility disappeared, the search for targets disappeared, and all of my interactions with men became much more genuine. And actually, I think deciding to no longer have sex or develop romantic entanglements with people enabled me to have deeper connections with them, because it took these possibilities off the table. And then the men that I met were less concerned about my feelings. They were less concerned about what I was going to want or ask for. And I was less concerned about them. And they knew very clearly that nothing was going to happen. Although admittedly, of course, some people took the celibacy as a challenge, which was inevitable. But this beautiful thing happened, and it really was great for my friendships with men. I developed friendships with men, and I learned to stand more on my own 2 feet. I learned to be more emotionally self-contained, which meant really digging into my purpose in life. And it meant really digging into my friendships. And again, I had thought my whole life that I was good at these things, but it turns out there was a whole chunk of energy that I had going towards men, going towards trying to be validated, and constantly being hurt by the disappointment of not finding the connection and validation and stuff that I wanted. And so that progressively happened. And even while I was committed to celibacy, I fell for somebody, of course, right? Of course, this is what always happens. And it was somebody, and it was like a real thing with a capital R. And he had a girlfriend, of course, because men always have a girlfriend. That's actually rule number 20 in the playbook, is they always have a girlfriend. Quick aside. But through having this experience of quote unquote, capital R, realness with him, and also encountering somebody for the first time, I could see how I would ordinarily get obsessive at this point in time. And I would nitpick his behavior and try to figure out what I could do to convince him to like me and all this sort of stuff. Like I saw that potential, and stalk him on Facebook really thoroughly, all those things. I saw the potential for this to happen to me and my relationship with him, and follow down that obsessive path that I used to always go down. And I could choose to not walk down it. And celibacy gave me the power to do that, and gave me the power to not become obsessed with people who could fulfill my needs. And I also learned that the other people, their needs matter too, and asking them or trying to manipulate them or seeking from them some sort of validation in me was not necessarily always fair. It wasn't fair to this guy that I thought about him in terms of what he could give me. And maybe I should still continue to persevere in thinking in terms of what I can give people, and care less about what sort of romantic needs they're meeting from me in turn. And that was incredibly liberating for me. And I felt as though I had learned so much that come August and September, when I did some traveling and I met some people and what have you, I got involved with them, but it happened in a way that was much less emotionally fraught with tension. I think there had been a lot of healing in my time of celibacy, of not getting involved with men who would treat me poorly, and developing friendships with men who treated me well, and developing my friendships with women. I think there was a lot of healing, and I became less needy in terms of filling the holes that the trauma of interacting with men had given me. I think there's this pattern that some people fall into, and not everybody, but when you experience trauma that makes you feel hurt and lonely, and objectified, dehumanized, which has definitely was for several years my only experience with men. That trauma actually made me seek out attention from men. And so I was stuck in this vicious cycle. And I managed to climb out of it by taking space and healing and actually doing that very cliche thing of digging deep into myself and my purpose and feeling at home in a way that made that I felt a completeness. I didn't need to be completed by the men around me. And thus I am, arrived at 30 and happy and single and very comfortable with not having that sort of thing. I do have to continue to be careful that I don't fall into these kinds of obsessive traps, and that I don't fall into that panic that women often do in terms of finding partners, definitely in their 30s and the like. But life is exciting, and there are so many beautiful ways to be connected with people and to feel whole and to experience community that I just don't need a specific romantic type anymore. So anyway, in closing, that was a resolution I made that radically changed my life for the better. And anybody out there who has struggled a lot with their relationships, with sex or with love or whatever, I think maybe taking a break and like a really committed break, could shed some important light on your own emotional landscape for you. I'm not saying anybody has to do that, but my experience was overwhelmingly positive. And so I think it could be at least worth a shot if you're feeling really, really down in some way or another. So that's that. I'm going to let it go. I hope that me blabbing about celibacy wasn't too obnoxious for you. I will be back, of course, in a few days with episode 13. I'm super excited, and I will be announcing in that another winner of the free book giveaway. So tune in next week for that. Sorry, I didn't have one to announce this week. We'll get to it next week. And I am very, very, very excited to be giving books away. So do keep your ears open. All right, you can find me at stephanieruper.com, on the Insta, on the Facebook at Stephanie Ruper, and The Meaning of Everything you can find on all various podcast and YouTube outlets. Dropping a review could be a real big help for me. And of course, I will enter you into a drawing to get a free book as well if you do. So thank you again so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you next week. Take care.